You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Well, this has been a difficult week, day after day of terrible news. One of the two oldest newspapers in this country, the Capital Gazette in Maryland, covered the Declaration of Independence, but on its second page, because local news, as usual, took precedent on its front page. Today, when we mourn the shrinking of local news coverage, we also literally must mourn the deaths of 5 journalists who were simply doing their jobs. They were murdered in the Capital Gazette newsroom by an angry white man with a gun and a history of violent, threatening sexual harassment. Given the proliferation of guns in our society, plus the man occupying our White House who calls the press the greatest enemy of the people, and given the statistics that some form of violence against women is almost invariably a red flag in the background of men who turn out to kill, I suppose none of this is surprising. One way I try to stay sane in such times is poetry, because poetry can be sacred speech. It, at its best, looks at the unseeable, it names the unknowable, and it speaks what was previously thought unutterable. Today, my guest is Tracy K. Smith, the Poet Laureate of the United States. But before we get into any of that, you and I have to hold hands and go inside the headlines. Here's the thing. We can't go inside the headlines this week because the headlines themselves are so devastating they stop us. The U.S. government is offering a trade to immigrant mothers seeking asylum from terror. You can get your kids back if you will immediately self-deport. 3 major disastrous decisions by the Supreme Court on abortion rights, on Trump's Muslim ban, and on organized labor, followed by the announcement of Justice Kennedy's retirement. With the perhaps less noticed, but even more harrowing headlines that tropical forests suffered near record tree losses last year, and Antarctica is melting at a much faster pace than predicted. We are critically ill, literally sickened by this enveloping toxicity. For myself, not since the night of the election have I felt so physically nauseated all the time as I have this past week. So I'm not going to be a chatty Cathy doll trying to cheer you up. I'm not going to add to the lies around us by saying I'm sure we'll get through this or that it isn't as bad as it seems. I'm not sure we'll get through this, and it is as bad as it seems. Possibly worse. We can't believe this is really happening. That's part of the problem. Progressives, well, we progress. We fight for something, and then when we think that's won, we consider it a done deal and move on. Not so with our adversaries. They rise and walk. They spend all their energy staying in the same place, however old a place that is, and however much the world has changed around it and them. So we've always taken for granted that time was on our side, which it is, and which is why the species has made any progress at all. Except that with Antarctica melting and the trees dying, time is no longer on anybody's side. So, what do we do? What do we do? I can only offer you 5 tips about what I've decided to do, in the hope that it's useful, maybe adaptable for your style and your circumstances. 1. It's okay to despair. Face into the reality, no sugarcoating. It's okay to cry and vomit and shut off the news for a day. It's okay that your hair's on fire. Worry about your own humanity if it's not. You're not betraying any cause if you let yourself grieve for the death of our innocence in having believed that certain standards of conduct, values, policy, intelligence would get us through. If any of the framers were alive today, they would despair, you can be certain of that. Remember that Ben Franklin said, "We have given you a republic, if you can keep it." They regarded this new country, more the idea of this new country, as a grand experiment. And right now we're having an extremely bad period in the laboratory. So it's okay to despair. 2. It's okay to be bitter. I'm still angry that Obama didn't appoint Merrick Garland as an interim appointment when he could have. And much more, I am still furious about people who didn't vote in 2016. I am still livid about people who didn't vote for Hillary because they didn't like her voice, or why did she stay with him, or she wasn't warm and cuddly enough, or she was too much of a harpy or a feminist, or not enough of a feminist, or any other moronic reason. I still have fits of rage about the purists, the Ralph Nader voters, who insisted there was really no difference between Bush and Gore, and their later incarnations, the Bernie Bros and the Jill Stein voters, who said Trump and Hillary were really just the same. For decades I have argued with such people, please just focus on the court. Think about the court appointments. The court alone shows you the difference. But they were so interested in their own purity, some still are, they refused to see it. Well, take a glance at the justices appointed by George W. Bush, who would have otherwise been Democratic appointments under a President Gore. Chief Justice John Roberts in 2005, and Samuel Alito in 2006, and of course now we have Neil Gorsuch, appointed by Trump, instead of whomever a President Hillary Clinton would have nominated, not to speak of who's coming. 3. It's okay to blame yourself. Did you do everything you possibly could have done to avert this moment? Did you send money, or only send money? Did you volunteer time? Join a campaign? Do more than argue with relatives and feel good about winning, or unfriend people on Facebook and feel clever? Did you do everything? Of course you didn't. I didn't. Nobody has. Not Obama, not Hillary, nobody. We took too much for granted. So go ahead, blame yourself, wallow in it. Then take a deep breath, look around you, and rejoice, because the Crab Nebula doesn't give one damn, and you have a chance for a do-over. 4. It's okay to forgive yourself for what you didn't do or did wrong or didn't do enough. It's still not yet too late. But you're tired. You're exhausted after the 500-plus days of national nightmare of Trumpism. So first, do whatever you need to do to feel even temporarily better. Sleep all weekend, or go for a hike, listen to music, garden, meditate, see movies, whatever works for you. And buy a cheap little cactus plant to remind yourself about survival. It's okay to stop and bandage up your bleeding. 5. Set a timer. It's okay to despair and be bitter, to blame yourself and forgive yourself, but set a timer, and when it goes off, time's up and break's over. Mine is a day and a half maximum, but I suggest not one day over a week. We have 4 months until the midterm elections. The founders of this republic were deeply flawed men with a crazy idea. In Fighting Words at the end of this program, we're going to hear some of their words about that idea, words that were stunningly prescient, as if they could foresee this moment in future history, because they knew humankind. How to address foreign interference, what to do when a tyrant rises in our midst. Those people, the framers of our Constitution and founders of our country, gave us 3 equal branches of government. 2 of those branches are controlled by men trying to make deep, lasting, and transformatively violating changes to the Republic's idea itself. But there is a third branch, and it is ours. All ours. 4 years ago, only 36% of the eligible electorate cast ballots in the midterms. If more people had voted, Mitch McConnell would not be majority leader and would not have been able to block Obama's nominated Justice Merrick Garland. Some things we already know. We know it is likely there will be interference from Russia or elsewhere in these midterm elections, and we know that the Trump regime has done nothing to protect us from that. On the contrary. We know that the Republican majority in the Senate killed the filibuster on Supreme Court justices, so a simple majority can approve one, and they have that majority, as of now. We know that women's rights, the right to reproductive freedom, voting rights, marriage equality, and other same-sex rights, racial and partisan gerrymandering, affirmative action, constitutional violations in the criminal justice system, corporate purchase of elections, and the erosion of the wall between church and state, all the core issues of democracy are now endangered, if not yet doomed, and openly so. They tell us what they want to do. But this we also know. We must organize voting turnout as never before, in such numbers as to compensate for Russian meddling at the polls, and for an energized Trump base. We have to fight like hell. The executive branch has been breached. The judicial branch has been kidnapped. It's just us. But perhaps that was inevitable, because it means that what we face in November, and in organizing between this moment and November, is the absolute core of the idea of the Republic, the heart of democracy. It is the voice of the people. It is the cactus plant. The founders gave us a republic. Can we keep it? The responsibility is ours, and the power is in our hands and in what we do next. It's up to you and me. We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but I'll be back in just a moment, and coming right up to soothe our frazzled souls is the Poet Laureate of the United States.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. My guest today, as I promised, is Tracy K. Smith. She is the Poet Laureate of the United States, the 22nd such Poet Laureate. She's an American poet and educator, and she's published 3 collections of poetry, winning the Pulitzer for her 2011 volume, Life on Mars. She was born in Falmouth, Massachusetts, raised in Fairfield, California, in a family with deep roots, as she says, in Alabama. Her mom was a teacher, and her dad was an engineer who worked on the Hubble telescope. She received her bachelor's degree from Harvard, then earned an MFA in creative writing at Columbia. She's taught at Medgar Evers College at the City University of New York, the University of Pittsburgh, and Columbia, and in 2005 she joined the faculty of Princeton University, where she's a professor of creative writing. Tracy K. Smith. Tracy, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have the Poet Laureate of the United States with us, and you must be Wonder Woman as a sideline because you got 3 small kids. You're teaching, you're doing the job of the Poet Laureate, and you're finding time or making time to write too. I have to start by saying, how are you doing all this? And have you given up sleep entirely?
Well, I think once you have kids, sleep becomes a different kind of commodity. So I'm getting plenty of rest, let's say. But I'm also exhilarated by all the different things that I'm doing or that I have the opportunity to do. And Princeton has been really wonderful about giving me, fewer teaching responsibilities and space to accommodate.
You're in your second term now as a poet laureate.
Yes, reappointed, which feels good. It means I'll get the chance to do more trips. We'll get to visit more parts of the country over the next year.
Are you lecturing, giving readings, talking poetry, demystifying poetry for people who run scared in the other direction? Because that's usually the way it's taught in schools in this country.
I'm really doing my best to take some of that anxiety away from the process of approaching a poem. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing that in different ways, by reading and talking about my own work, and also by reading and trying to have conversations with people about the work of other contemporary American poets. And, reinforcing the sense that the reactions that we have as people to the sounds of language and to the content of, poems are valid starting points for digging into the pleasures of poetry.
It always breaks my heart that poetry, which, can make us laugh and cry and have the hair on the back of our necks stand up with awe, is seen as something boring, is seen as something dusty or not relevant to people's real lives, when it is most relevant to people's real lives.
Yeah. I feel that way too. I feel like, it gives us a vocabulary for those powerful feelings that often defy speech. And poems are good at bringing the many disparate things that affect us and that live in our lives, bringing those things together. So.
And the music of poetry as well, which people are not taught to listen for. Rita Dove is always so wonderful on that, one of your precursors as poet laureate, and a friend who's done the program more than once. And, she's a cellist as well. No, the viola, that's what it is she plays. And she, when Rita talks about the music of poetry, you're utterly entranced. You came to poetry very young with Emily Dickinson. Am I correct?
Yeah, you are. I started to really love the magic and the music and the play of poetry when I was in elementary school, reading on my own, maybe reading ahead in a school textbook, but also reading some of the books on the shelves at home and feeling free to enjoy and not have to, analyze or what often I think people are forced to do is paraphrase poems, which is to diminish the might and power by saying, well, another way of saying that would be this. So I was free from any of the anxieties that we often learn in the classroom, or maybe I shouldn't say often, but sometimes. And so I just had the sense that there is a wisdom and a joy in poetry that I just wanted to have access to. I wanted to make space for that in my life. And as I got older, when I got to college, I met living writers, and I met other young people who hoped to become writers, and I found a way in to that as a vocation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just children are before the culture gets to them. I think are naturally drawn because there's rhyme and there's rhythm and there's music and there's wordplay. I mean, and it's fun.
And kids are good at that, all of those things, and they're also so good at seeing possibility within language to mean and express differently than in linear or straightforward ways. They're great at playing with combinations of words to come up with a new sense of reality.
Right.
And we need that. I think when adults return to that, there's a real sense of joy and wonder that it brings, and that joy and wonder can live in, the everyday life.
Yeah, and enrich our lives so much. I mean, when people say, "Oh, you write poetry," and you can see their face fall, I mean, you're sort of like, well, what relevance? Don't you write novels? Don't you write nonfiction? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, we talk a lot about the poetry skeptic, and there are many of those, but there are also people who say, "Oh, you write poetry. Well, I always loved this poem," or "When I was in school, I loved doing recitations." many people don't have that phobia, but they just haven't made space for this thing that they once loved in, a day of lots of obligations and responsibilities.
They're sort of closeted, as if to admit that they love poetry is somehow a sin. But when they feel it's safe, they come creeping out, which is quite lovely. The new book is called Wade in the Water. It's your third book, and the books have met with great critical success, a Cave Canem Poetry Prize, the James Laughlin Award of the American Academy of Poets, and Life on Mars, which won the Pulitzer. And you also wrote a memoir, Ordinary Light, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. So at least they're appreciating you. And the poems certainly are deservedly so. I want to see if I can con you into reading one or two for us. Can I?
I'd love that. Of course.
That's wonderful. Well, the trouble is that I have a list of 472,000 books. So you can choose among them. Wade in the Water, the title poem itself is very special. Ash is quite wonderful. Dusk is one that I just love. It's a mother's poem. Urban Youth, because of the beauty that you've done with the form. The U.S. welcomes you, and A Man's World. Or The Greatest Personal Privation, which is a stunner. And then I want to talk about the letters, poems, but any of the above or anything else in the book that you choose to read.
Okay.
We would love.
Well, maybe I'll start with the title poem, since that might give us, a sense of grounding in some of the themes of the book. Mm-hmm. And this is a poem that comes from the tradition of the ring shout, which is, rooted in African American history, back to the days of slavery. Wade in the water. One of the women greeted me. "I love you," she said. She didn't know me, but I believed her, and a terrible new ache rolled over in my chest, like in a room where the drapes have been swept back. "I love you. I love you," as she continued down the hall, past other strangers, each feeling pierced suddenly by pillars of heavy light. "I love you" throughout the performance, in every hand clap, every stomp. "I love you" in the rusted iron chains someone was made to drag, until love let them be unclasped and left empty in the center of the ring. "I love you" in the water, where they pretended to wade, singing that old blood-deep song that dragged us to those banks and cast us in. "I love you," the angles of it scraping at each throat, shouldering past the swirling dust motes in those beams of light that whatever we now knew we could let ourselves feel, knew to climb. Oh, woods. Oh, dogs. Oh, tree. Oh, gun. Oh, girl, run. Oh, miraculous, many gone. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord, is this love the trouble you promised?
That last line is a flattener. It just flattens you. It's so stunning. Oh, thank you. More, please.
Well, love is such a big question that I've sought to explore in the poems throughout this book. That's a poem that is thinking also toward history, right? Toward those
Yes.
that catalog of images really takes me to, this sense of escape, imperiled escape.
Yes.
And I'm trying to figure out if love could be a word that lives not just in our vocabulary of like intimate experience, but in our vocabulary as like citizens. Is compassion a skill that we can learn to embrace and embody? I hope the answer is yes.
Thematically, I think the book explores that, and your work explores that. it's political in the deep sense of political. It's not lots of words ending in TION or ISM, but it's deeply feminist. It's deeply radical. It takes on the deep scar of racism in this country in a profound and very personal way. The series of Civil War letters, in effect. I hope that you'll also take a moment and talk a little bit about them and how you researched them and how you use them in the book, because they just stagger the soul. They're so beautiful and so moving.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I was invited in 2011 to contribute a poem for the commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the beginning of the Civil War, an exhibition that was going to be at the National Portrait Gallery. And I didn't know very much about the conflict other than, there is still some debate as to whether or not the Civil War was or was not about ending slavery. Or I know the image of, the reenactments that happen in different parts of the country throughout the year, but I didn't have a private sense of investment. And so I thought if I could find some information that would tell me about what Black soldiers were dealing with during that conflict, maybe I could really muster the curiosity and the urgency to write a poem. And I found two books that are just amazing gatherings of primary source material. One collects letters from families, like veterans to their family members, and from them to President Abraham Lincoln. And that book is called Families and Freedom, a documentary history of African American kinship in the Civil War era. And that's edited by Ira Berlin and Leslie Rowland. And reading those letters, it was just hundreds of letters, I felt like these voices are not dusty, they're not remote, they don't feel irrelevant. And I just wanted to immerse myself in these voices. Another book that I found, edited by Elizabeth Ragosin and Donald Schaefer, is called Voices of Emancipation, Understanding Slavery, the Civil War, and Reconstruction Through the Pension Bureau Files. And those are the depositions that veterans and their descendants gave well into the 20th century in an attempt to claim pensions that people were being denied because they were born into slavery and didn't have birth certificates, marriage licenses, documents explaining that having changed their name during emancipation, they were still entitled to pension for having fought under a different name. And those voices felt equally urgent to me. And so I knew that my poem wasn't going to be a matter of digesting this stuff and commenting upon it, or imagining myself into one of these positions, but merely to curate a chorus of these urgent voices so that, I could just listen to them with others.
Yeah, well, you do. You step back and they take the page, and there is simply no way to emerge without being devastated and also in love with these people, these individual people, because of the details. A wife saying, I have no means of support, and if you could please, and all the great respect, dear President Lincoln, please.
Oh, I know. They call him Your Excellency in some cases.
I know. It just, the heart cracks on reading these. There's a remarkable way in which poets, Jewish American poets are doing this now. African American poets, I think, are in the forefront of it. All women who have, I think of Robin Cost Lewis, who and Voyage of the Sable Venus. And in that case, she's done the view from the outside. She has in the title poem used the actual descriptions in museum catalogs and labeling of depictions of the female African body and African American body, and just letting the words speak for themselves. You come out and you need a stretcher to pick you up from the floor.
Yeah.
And I think there's something remarkable going on among women poets in claiming, Irina Klepfitz has done this with Yiddish, and in claiming a history and the oppression of a history without political jargon, and with that exquisite attention to detail that resurrects people in all their individuality, and then there's no way to escape the politics.
Yeah, I think poetry is really good at that, at putting you at a skin level, distance from another life, and allowing you to feel the effects of the politics that we make.
Yes.
By just dwelling in or beside another person's lived experience. It's difficult not to be moved by what other people endure.
You can read all the books that you want on, the history of the Civil War, and you will not be as moved as, one of those letters, because you are in contact with a living, breathing human being and their suffering and their humor and their hope and their love. It's impossible to non-identify. I wish these poems were required reading, in schools across this country. I mean, you're working on, this fascinated me, you're writing 2 operas.
Yeah. Well, one is done. One I've worked on over the last several years with a composer named Judd Greenstein and a visual artist named Joshua Frankel. And that explores the conflict in New York City between Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses, and their really different views of what, urban life should look like.
You bet.
And now, it's funny because that wasn't I was a New Yorker for many years. I knew some, but not much about Robert Moses, and I learned a lot about Jane Jacobs and just about the city that I lived in,
right,
by working on that project. And now I'm working on another project that has real estate in mind. Although it's in a different setting, I'm thinking about the ways that land that was purchased by blacks during Reconstruction is, in some cases, held by members of the same family, but it's also being sought after by developers and, potential, I don't know, it's not gentrification, but whatever, people who are eager to cash in on the value of coastal property by marketing it in different kind of like vacation-y ways. And so the story I'm writing with composer Gregory Spears is about one family's response to the dilemma of keeping this land, which is a kind of cultural stewardship and a home, and cashing out when one family member really needs that windfall.
Interesting. Well, we'll look forward to the 2 of them. Well, can I prevail upon you for another poem before we close? It would be just a delight.
Sure. Okay. I'm having trouble deciding what that should be.
I don't blame you.
Maybe I'll read the poem Dusk that you mentioned, which is in a different vein, but it's about being a mother. I think it's about having a daughter and knowing that she's going to become a woman at some point, and living with that sense of promise and also fear.
Yes, do read it, please.
Okay. Dusk. What woke to war in me those years when my daughter had first grown into a solid, self-centered self? I'd watch her sit at the table. Well, not quite sit. More like stand on one leg, while the other knee hovered just over the chair. She wouldn't lower herself, as if there might be a fire or a great black blizzard of waves let loose in the kitchen, and she'd need to make her escape. No, she'd trust no one but herself, her own new, lean, always jittering legs to carry her. Where exactly? Where would a child go? To there, alone. She'd rest one elbow on the table, the opposite one to the bent leg skimming the solid, expensive, tasteful chair. And even though we were together, her eyes would go half dome, shades dropped, like a screen at some cinema the old aren't let into. I thought I'd have more time. I thought my body would have taken longer going about the inevitable feat of repelling her. But now, I could see even in what food she left untouched, food I'd bought and made and all but ferried to her lips, I could see how it smacked of all that had grown slack and loose in me. Her other arm would wave the fork around just above the surface of the plate, casting about for the least possible morsel, the tiniest grain of unseasoned rice. She'd dip into the food like one of those shoddy metal claws poised over a valley of rubber bouncing balls, the kind that lifts nothing or next to nothing and drops it in the chute. The narrow, untouched hips, the shoulders still so naive as to stand squared, erect, impervious, facing the window open onto the darkening dusk.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That is a love of a poem.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for reading it and for writing it. And congratulations on being Poet Laureate yet again, and all possible best luck in your writing. We'll look forward to your opera. Will you come back and talk to us when the operas are actually
I'd
being
love that.
That would be wonderful. And thanks so much for being with us today, Tracy, on Women's
what a pleasure.
Media Center Live. It's been a delight. We do more poets than I think most any other radio and podcast, because I am one and I love my kind. So thank you. Thank you again, and all possible wonderful luck and time to write lots more poems.
Oh, thank you.
We have to take another brief break here at Women's Media Center Live, but I'll return directly with some words from the founders of this idea, this nation we live in.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again to an extended Fighting Words. A few years ago, I published a book called Fighting Words, a Toolkit for Combating the Religious Right, a compilation of quotes and documents from this country's founders and a cross-section of other intelligent Americans on the crucial importance of a secular, pluralistic society. It still is in wide use, both in print and in digital forms. Today, in Fighting Words here, I want to return to the framers in that as well as a broader context. Rather than spend time sourcing each quote aloud, I'll tell you that many can be found in my book, Fighting Words, as well as in the great founders' biographies by Joseph Ellis, David McCullough, and others, and the historical documents quoted can be found easily online. Let me also restate that the framers were certainly imperfect, all white, all male, and people of their time. But they were also complex human beings deeply influenced by the Enlightenment. Some were slaveholders. Some were abolitionists. Some were both. They used the word man and men and mankind, and the thinking that accompanied it, as a generic, although a few of them glimpsed this as wrong. They were racist and sexist and could even be slightly pro-monarchist, but they also had a peculiar, audacious vision, and we're it. Listeners to this program and podcast probably include some of the best educated people in the country, and therefore possibly the world, yet I'm continually surprised by the emails you send to my website expressing your kind gratitude for learning facts from this program, facts which, frankly, we should all already know as part of our common heritage, both as Americans and as world citizens, except they're not taught in schools. These days we're reading less, too, and using emoticons more, and soon we'll be back to hieroglyphics. What we don't know includes facts like these. The Constitution contains not one reference to a deity, on purpose. Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration of Independence did not mention that men were, quote, endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights, but simply read, created equal and independent, that from equal creation they derived in rights inherent and unalienable. How about this one? Quote, the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Close quote. That's George Washington in initiating the Treaty of Tripoli. Here's John Adams, quote, the United States of America were contrived merely by the use of reason and the senses, founded on the natural authority of the people alone, without a pretense of miracle or mystery. Jefferson's strongest influences were reason and science, so much so that his enemies denounced him as an infidel. He advised, question with boldness even the existence of God. In an 1810 letter, he wrote, laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, as new discoveries are made, new truths disclosed, and manners and opinions change with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also, and keep pace with the times. Might as well require a man to still wear the same coat that fitted him when a boy, as require civilized society to remain ever under the regimen of their barbarous ancestors. Close quote. You know, that quote alone ought to silence the strict originalists who insist that the intent of the Constitution is to be a static, not a living document. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, denounced the use of religion as an engine of civil policy and wrote, quote, religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind. The wording in his own draft of the First Amendment, delivered in his speech to the House of Representatives in 1789, was both more specific and more inclusive than the final version. Quote, the civil rights of none shall be abridged on account of religious belief or worship, nor shall any national religion be established, nor shall the full and equal rights of conscience be in any manner or on any pretext infringed. Close quote. That wording also protected atheism and agnosticism, quite fitting since most of the framers were atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, or deists who believed in divinity as a force of nature. And here is Madison, who, after all, wrote the Second Amendment, clarifying its meaning for all time, despite the NRA's powerful lobby. In a letter written at the same time he was drafting the amendment, he wrote, quote, a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people, trained in arms, is the best, most natural defense of a free country. Close quote. Nothing about the individual right to bear arms. But we don't know that, nor that the amendment was forced in as a demand of the slaveholding states where militia was synonymous with posses that hunted escaping enslaved persons and put down slave revolts. Without that amendment, the southern states were refusing to join the nation. For more on this, if you haven't heard it, check out episode 239 of this program from March of this year in the online archives. James Madison is, in fact, quite a surprising treasure to someone first looking into the framers after moving on from the usual focus on Washington, Adams, and Jefferson. He was short, quiet, brilliant, and married to Dorothea Dolly Dandridge Payne Todd, today known for an ice cream being named after her. Yet she was herself quite a canny politician, at whose dinner tables and teas the revolution itself was plotted, and then the presidencies thereafter negotiated, with her present, and speaking up, too. No doubt this is why Madison wrote, quote, "The capacity of the female mind for studies of the highest order cannot be doubted, having been sufficiently illustrated by its works of genius, of erudition, and of science," close quote. Pretty good, especially while John Adams was responding to Abigail that he would in fact not remember the ladies, because then it was a slippery slope to even non-property holders demanding a voice. Madison also volunteered, quote, "I should not regret a fair and full trial of the entire evolution of capital punishment," close quote. But back to issues startlingly relevant to this particular moment in our history. Trump calls the press the greatest enemy of the people. As if in reply, Madison wrote, "To the press alone, checkered as it is with abuses, the world is indebted for all the triumphs which have been gained by reason and humanity over error and oppression." Jefferson, writing to Lafayette, stated, "The only security of all lies in a free press. The force of public opinion cannot be resisted when permitted freely to be expressed. The agitation it produces must be submitted to. It is necessary to keep the waters pure." On the same subject, here is James Monroe. "It is only when the people become ignorant and corrupt, when they degenerate into a populace, that they are incapable of exercising their sovereignty." They were well aware, these radical founders, of the future threats we face now. So the next time someone says you're exaggerating the danger, let Madison answer for you, quote, "We are right to take alarm at the first experiment upon our liberties." And let Washington back you up, quote, "The domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads to a more formal and permanent despotism." He also warned us to guard against the impostures of pretended patriotism. And in his great farewell address of 1796, stepping down despite others' insistence that he served more terms or even be crowned king, he warned about factions that have, quote, "an artificial and extraordinary force to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation the will of a party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community." He added, "However combinations or associations of the above description may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion." Samuel Adams said it shorter, quote, "How strangely will the tools of a tyrant pervert the plain meaning of words." We have to interrupt this extended version of Fighting Words with one last break. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll return in just a moment with more fighting words left us by the founders of this nation, as if in a time capsule, on factionalism, foreign interference, corruption, lies, and immigration. Coming up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we are back again with more fighting words. Please understand, sisters and friends, that these quotes are only samples of what the framers left us to whet your thirst for more, to give you an idea of how angry they would be if they could see our present state, Yet how odd they'd be that we still had a republic at all. And you can be strengthened by realizing whose side they would be on regarding current issues, and use them accordingly. On fear-mongering against the other, they who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. That's Ben Franklin. But on real, malignant foreign influences, they were quite clear. Washington, quote, "Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens. The jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake." And how many opportunities do they afford to tamper with domestic factions, to practice the art of seduction, to mislead public opinion, to influence public councils? Alexander Hamilton weighed in Federalist Papers No. 22, quote, "One of the weak sides of republics, among their numerous advantages, is that they afford too easy an inlet to foreign corruption." On setting people against one another, Washington again. "It is easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters, much pains will be taken, many artifices employed, to weaken in your mind the conviction of unity, as this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, though often and covertly and insidiously, directed." And again, "What agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms kindles the animosity of one part against another. It opens the door to foreign influence and corruption, which find a facilitated access to the government itself through the channels of party passions." On corruption, Jefferson minced no words. "I hope we shall crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations, which today are all ready to challenge our government to a trial by strength, and bid defiance to the laws of our country." And he also wrote, "Experience demands that man is the only animal which devours its own kind, for I can apply no milder term to the general preying of the rich on the poor." As for lying individually and in policy, well, regarding breaking our treaties and agreements, Jefferson warned, "History bears witness to the fact that a just nation is taken on its word." And as for those who would hold office, he said, "The whole art of government consists in the art of being honest." If the people misconceived the importance of the facts, he was ready sounding the alarm. Quote, "If they remain quiet under such misconceptions, it is a lethargy, the forerunner of death to the public liberty." And as if in direct address to Trump and Trumpists, quote, "He who knows nothing is closer to the truth than he whose mind is filled with falsehoods and errors." Let's give Madison the penultimate word, and let it be about the way the framers regarded immigrants, among which they counted themselves. Quote, "America was indebted to immigration for her very settlement and prosperity. That part of America which has encouraged these most has advanced most rapidly in population, agriculture, and the arts." And the very last words are not from a framer, but from another American, less than 50 years later, spoken at a place called Gettysburg. "Now we are testing whether this nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We here highly resolve that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." Abraham Lincoln. Those are our fighting words for today. Add yours on Twitter and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. You can also stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast at iTunes, at Stitcher, and at Google Play. Be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. My latest book, Dark Matter, New Poems, is available online and off wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMClive.com. Talk radio with a brain.